persisted, leading to the sudden invasion and occupation of Kuwait in 1990.
While the pretext was claimed Kuwait's alleged oil theft, Iraq's underlying reason from its belief that Kuwait rightfully belonged to Iraq due to historical and imperialistic reasons.
The Persian Gulf War. The Iraq invasion of Kuwait in 1990 caused an international response. The United States assembled a multinational coalition called Operation Desert Storm. Despite not occupying Baghdad to prevent Iraq's breakup and benefit Iran, efforts to expel Saddam Hussein failed, leading to the ongoing economic sanctions and challenges for U.S. presidents including Bill Clinton and George W. Bush in dealing with Saddam's regime. Conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Taliban, supported by Pakistan religious forces, served as a base for Al-Qaeda's operation. After the attack on September 11, the U.S. coalition overthrew the Taliban. However, the country's history of tribal warfare made it difficult. Despite bin Laden's death, Taliban forces continued to operate in Afghanistan. The Bush administration expanded its regional objectives in 2003. The US-led forces occupied Iraq, aiming to restore stability and build a democratic society. However, sectarian clashes and armed resistance continued. Obama replaced occupation forces with Iraq troops, but the situation remained unstable. Falls down the Arab Spring. It soon became, however, the optimism of a peaceful Middle East was misplaced as unstable conditions lead to civil unrest in several countries. In Egypt, a new government replaced a strict interpretation of Islamic law. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi regime was toppled and Yemen's conflict led to the proxy wars between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The most ominous consequences were in Syria, where various ethnic groups rose up against the Shiite government, leading to the formation of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or the ISIS, aiming to create a caliphate.
Society and culture in the contemporary Middle East.
In the Middle East today, all aspects of society and cultures, from political and economic issues to literature, art, and the role of the family, are intertwined with the question of religious faith. Varieties of government, the political of Islam. In 2003, U.S. officials hoped the overthrow of Saddam Hussein's regime would lead to the democratic values in the Middle East. However, Arab nations and the Persian Gulf have limited democratic experimentations. Turkey, a Muslim-based country, has seen a rise in free elections and power sharing, but faces challenges like corruption and religious favoritism, raising doubts about its success amidst internal division and regional conflicts. The economics of the Middle East, oil and sand. The Middle East wealth disparity is primarily due to uneven distribution of oil reserves, with Egypt and Turkey having almost no reserves, and Kuwait, UAE, and Saudi Arabia having 35 million inhabitants. This disparity has inspired Nasser's quest for Arab unity, but also poses a major obstacles.
Here, we have a comparative illustration from rags to riches in the Middle East.
Economics and Islam. The Quran offers limited guidance on economic policies for Muslims. Consequently, Middle Eastern states have pursued various economic models. However, common challenges such as rapid population growth, corruption, and educational deficiencies hinder economic progress. Rural poverty gets worse by limited arable land. Poor countries sometimes tell their people to move to the rich countries, especially with those countries that are rich in oil. But when there's trouble like political problems or the price of oil getting dropped fast, the UAE kicks out foreigners to lower the number of migrants.
The Islamic Revival. May mga conservative religious forces na nagtatangkang alisin ang foreign influence sa pamamagitan ng pagbabalik sa tinatawag na pure Islamic forms of belief. At ang ganitong mga pananaw ay naging major factor sa pag-angat ng popularity ng mga kilusang terorista tulad ng Al-Qaeda at ISIS.
Modernist Islam. In the early 20th century, Muslim intellectuals responded to the Western influence by attempting to modernize Islam to fit the new era. This approach was embraced in countries like Turkey, Egypt, and Iran, where some leaders sought to secularize Islam while prioritizing political and economic development. This led to the religion becoming intertwined with political power, national identity, and economic progress. While secularization was prominent among urban elites, it had less impact in rural areas and among the poor. Return to tradition. After World War II, opposition from conservative Muslims against modernist movements in the Middle East grew. Iran's strong Shiite tradition and the secular reforms of the post-war Shah contributed to this. Iranian leaders uphold traditional Islamic beliefs. The Iranian Revolution influenced the region and even reached Southeast Asia. Women in the Middle East. The debate over women's role in the Middle Eastern Muslim societies reflects sharp divisions between tradition and modernity, with the women historically having limited rights and freedoms. Modernists argue that Islamic doctrine does not inherently oppose women's rights.
This perspective influenced Middle Eastern societies, but after the Iranian Revolution of 1979, a more traditional view of women's roles emerged. Advancement in women's rights in some countries, such as Kuwait and Qatar, and even signs of progress in Saudi Arabia.
Literature and art. As in other areas of Asia and Africa, the encounter with the West in the 19th and 20th centuries stimulated a cultural renaissance in the Middle East. Muslim authors translated Western works into Arabic and Persian and began to experiment with new literacy forms. Literature. Women writers have become more common and they often talk about the veil and chador, which are symbols of women's freedom and oppression. In Egypt, literature also flourished, especially with writers like Naguib Mahfouz, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1988 for his book Cairo Trilogy, which tells stories about ordinary people during difficult times. Music and politics. Palestinian rock music, however, often incorporates Arab musical themes and carries political messages, as seen in songs like the Song of the Engineer, praising a Palestinian involved in terrorist activities.
Amidst the Arab Spring, musicians across the region increasingly use their music for political activism, as evidenced by the song Come On Bashar Live, calling for the resignation of the Syrian president.
And that is the end of my report. Thank you, everyone.